to the modern market, where every day we discuss everything to do with the modern market. That is the crypto market, the NFT market, and how to make some or a lot of money on the internet. Loaded up for discussion today, we have Bitcoin passing $88,000 as crypto hits the total market cap all-time high. ETH ETF flows hit 295 million, more than the last 2 weeks combined, maybe even more than that, to be honest. And Doge continues its run up another 50% in the last 24 hours to more than 42 cents. Small pullback just before the show because there was a lot of leverage in the system, I think. So that's pulled back just a touch, as have the other majors too. We've also got the latest on price action on crypto and NFTs, plus an awesome conversation with Han, the founder of Shape, and the brilliant generative artist Kjetil Golid, who has produced some awesome work in the past, most known for Archetype, his art blocks piece, but is also producing some more stuff coming on Shape soon. So stay tuned for that. Today, we've got Funky and Han in the co-host seats. We're ready to get into it. But before we do, just a reminder, friends, nothing that we say here is financial advice. This market is very, very risky, and we don't know anything for sure. So please do proceed with caution and exercise your own judgment. With that out of the way, Funky, welcome to the co-host position. You are with us for I think you've been with us many times now, but you've got a special accessory with you today. For the people who are just listening on audio, you gotta talk us through this fashion choice you're making here.
GM fam, yeah, sure, B. So today, of course, I had to wear a Bitcoin shirt because, I mean, when you come $35 from touching 90 grand, that's a heck of a day, right? And then, of course, I have a big fat gold chain. You know, just feel like King Bitcoin right now. So really loving life. And this is only the beginning, which I think is what's really exciting, is that we're just getting started. So buckle up, people. It's going to get wild.
Talk us through the chain. I mean, in fact, I didn't even see the Bitcoin shirt. So yes, that is obviously very relevant. But the main thing that was striking was the humongous chain, hopefully not bought by Bitcoin profits. You're not selling that orange gold for the real gold, are you, Funky?
Heck no. And in fact, you know, just to be completely candid, this is plastic. When I was at the Indy 500 this year, my boss came out of the merch store and he had this and he just he just draped it over my neck. And he said, "This feels like something that the Funk should have."
I think it suits you well. It suits you very, very well. So I don't disagree with that at all. Han, welcome back with us again. Are you feeling similarly euphoric? This is unprecedented from Funky here. How are you feeling about the market and just generally with how things are going with Shape?
Oh yeah, I mean, excited and at all the things that are happening, and I think we need to up our accessory game.
Yeah, we do. I was going to say we're looking pretty bland here in comparison, right? Quick question for you though, Han. Thinking about like the last week or so much has happened post-election result. How have you as a founder kind of been processing it? Like putting the specific politics aside, I know some people will be exceptionally pro, some people will be against, but like from a founder perspective, thinking about yourself building out on Shape, like how has it affected you? What have your thoughts been?
Oh, every single crypto founder has been recomputing. We are now operating in a different environment at this point. There will be clear rules and regulations for our industry coming from the United States, and that is exciting. Once we're in that realm, it opens up so many possibilities. So every single founder has been recomputing strategies that can be taken by crypto companies. So it's been very exciting.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the sentiment that's been expressed from our conversations with people as well. And frankly, even the sentiment from ourselves. Like sometimes I forget that we are building in the industry in the sense that you have people who are building more technical things, like on a protocol level, but even as media operators within the space, it felt like there was a clear shift in the dynamic and a lot of excitement, which I think is ultimately good. But look, we've got a lot of stuff to get into today. We need to get all of the core information to you. We've got all the usual price action and headlines conversation to have. And then, as I said, we've got a great conversation coming up with Han and Kjetil Golid towards the end of the show. But just before we do that, we're delighted to shout out our sponsor for today's show, Gondi. Gondi is the premier NFT lending platform. Just yesterday on Gondi, a great purple cap CryptoPunk received around a 50% LTV loan for 45K at 20% APR for a few months. CryptoPunk floors have gone back to 100K if you missed it. So that's interesting to note. If you're in the business of NFTs, check Gondi out to earn some interest as a lender on your ETH or USDC. So those rates have gone up quite a lot, up to 20%. It wasn't as high as that just a while ago. Interesting to see. Right, so let's get into it. Starting with some price action, we have the majors still significantly up on where they were yesterday, although they have pulled back in the last hours or two. Bitcoin is up 6% to 87.7K. ETH is up 3% to 3.3K. And Solana is down a couple of percent at $213. On the meme coin side of things, things are still very, very green, although maybe pulling back just a touch. We've got Dogecoin. It was up 50%, around 40 something cents, now 39. Pepe's up 6. Whiff is down 3. Bonk is up 17. Bonk being the big mover out of kind of meme coin majors. Flocky is up 9. Act is up 30%. Remember, that was the one that was listed by Binance not so long ago, yesterday. Getting into the headlines themselves, you've got Bitcoin passing 88K. As we said, the crypto total market cap at that point in time was breached. So that was pretty significant. We've had other little interesting bits of information as part of that. Eric Balkunas noted that the Bitcoin industrial complex, ETFs and master and coins, saw $38 billion in trading volume yesterday. Lifetime records being set all over the place. Can't wait to speak with Funky about that. Also lost in the news yesterday, potentially MicroStrategy acquiring 27,200 Bitcoin as well. ETH ETF flows, which you might have missed, hit 295 million. ETH ETF flows last week, as early as last week and the week before, were basically non-existent. That has really started flowing now. And Vance Spencer noted on the timeline that the ETH net flows are 28% of Bitcoin net inflows, and ETH is 23% of Bitcoin market cap. So I wonder whether that's like a reasonable proportion that people are considering. And then finally, as you mentioned, Doge continued its run up with another 50% in the last 24 hours. Some notable sales around the space. AI generated nude portrait. This is the Lost Robbie by Robbie Barrett. Sold for 210 ETH. I know another one I think is listed around 300. CryptoPunk 3D glasses sold for 53 ETH. Beeple Giga Chad sold for 23.9 ETH. There was a huge move on CryptoPunks in general yesterday. Floor surged back to around $100,000, which is around 29 ETH after a huge buying day. That's what's going on in the headlines and some NFT stuff. Getting into just the Web3 Roundup to get obviously with everything else. Total market cap of Runes actually surpassed $1.5 billion yesterday, which prominent trader on the timeline, Moon Overlord, saw as a huge opportunity in the sense that that's very, very small compared to other meme coin ecosystems. Very big news, which we're not able to report on fully because we haven't got the full roundup. ETH 3.0 rumors circulate regarding the second merge into new consensus targeting 1 second block times. We'll be able to touch on that just a little bit. This was a talk by, I think, Justin Drake happening literally just a few hours ago in at the ETH event in Bangkok. And we're going to try and break down just very briefly what was explained there, but that's really breaking news. And finally, Russia proposes establishment of digital asset platform to promote investment into BRICS economies. A few things on the NFT side. A frog NFT from the Pond collection sells for $57,000. Interesting to see these meme coin communities kind of go in the direction of NFTs after. These are actually raffled once every few days, and clearly a huge demand for those at the moment. AI agent Zero Bro, this was a pretty fun one, launches an NFT collection for 0.1 Sol, and it's now trading at a 9x. AI agents taking over the timeline, and they're creating their own NFT collection, so that's interesting to observe. Also, the Luce NFT collection on Sol was up 100%, pretty cheap at a 1 Sol floor. But again, meme coin communities or meme coins going towards the NFT direction is just an interesting observation when traditionally it was NFT communities going into the more liquid direction. That is the Web3 Roundup. Those are the headlines. That's the price action. Funky, before we get into the headlines themselves, anything catching your attention out of the Web3 Roundup set of news?
Yeah, actually, believe it or not, as much as I want to talk about Bitcoin, the ETH news is really shocking to me. That completely, I missed that. And as someone who has to kind of understand the tech in my role as director of protocol relations, that could really be a game changer for ETH for them to get to 1 second block times. And I thought what was really interesting in that little blurb that you mentioned that I saw on screen was that the blobs could be of arbitrary size because the validators themselves will only need to verify the snark. So for people who don't know anything about ZK, effectively what that allows you to do is it's a very, very heavy mathematical computation, but you do not need to know the whole thing. A lot of the computation can be done off chain. You just get a piece of the ZK. And as long as the validator can actually demonstrate that that piece is correct in that mathematical puzzle, then you know that the rest is just a trust assumption that it is truth based on math. And so this really could be something quite powerful for ETH and adopting, because one of the things we constantly talk about is the scaling challenges, the fragmentation of liquidity because of L2s. And wow, that's really cool. I'm going to have to read up on that after for sure.
Okay, look, I think that's an awesome little summary. Let me just break it down. Let's go straight into the ETH stuff first, actually, and then we'll circle back to your favorite Bitcoin, because I think since we've gone in that direction, it'll be helpful to break down. I've just got one tweet. I think this talk literally happened no more than 2 hours ago, and our very own bread guy was there. So I'm going to try and make sense of some of his tweets, which was like live tweeting what was happening to try to get you up to speed with what was shared in this talk. So as you can see, this was a tweet from Brad Guy saying, we'll be tweeting slides for others to get the gist of Beam Chain, Justin Jake's reimagining of the consensus layer. So this is how it's being described, as it's called the Beam Chain. What does he say? Faster slots. But I don't think he necessarily thinks there's a huge change, Funky, although I'm just going to read some of this and then you may be able to speak to it. He says that it's more of a mimetic reprioritization, will be addressed with normal incremental forks for low-hanging fruits, then massive batch forks. So there will be a new era of Ethereum, ZK, heavily leveraging the snarks, which I think is what you were speaking about, which primarily focus on the state transition function. Can also be applied to the execution layer, but that's not the focus here. He said that whatever's been happening in the snarkifying has become exceedingly performant lately and can be aggregated and nested with leads credence to the ambitions. Look, this is very, very much more technical. More reasons for why consensus layer teams have become increasingly robust. When Beacon launched, there were basically none, byproduct of being the most mature smart contract platform. Final take, because people will be wondering what this all means, this kind of move to this focus on ZK. He said, is there any way to accelerate the timeline? So what's the kind of key outcome here and what's the expectation? He says, it's exciting, but the timeline is multi-cycle. So therefore, to the extent that you are a trader or a current team, this is probably meaningless for you. So look, this is like a very, very live take, trying to make sense of what was only shared not very long ago. So I don't know the full details, but maybe that's just a quick hit of what the news was announced, and we'll have to take more time to digest it. Funky, I'll come straight to you though, and maybe even Han, maybe you'll be able to speak to this in a second. I know there's not a lot of info here yet, but Funky, your first digest of that.
Yeah, no, this makes a lot of sense seeing what Brad said and just the timeline. And I think he meant reach out to the team to help. So this is, if you are a builder and you're working on ETH, this is definitely something that they're looking for. So I would obviously advocate for that as well. But seeing the timeline I thought this was something that was going to be within the next year or two, but it looks like just seeing his slides, this is something probably before the end of the decade. So, but still a great advancement for ETH. Kudos to the team.
Okay. Fair enough. I think that is very interesting. The final thing to say on ETH, which I just wanted to share with people, is the ETF flows, because for a long time, ETH was really was not well loved from the ETF side. What you can see on the screen, I'm showing this. Remember, we're live on X video and on YouTube video as well. For the first time, we had significant flows in the last few days. So 11th of November, 295 million. 8th of November, which is the 3 days at the end of last week, 85, 79, 52. So every single day there's slightly more. Yesterday was 3 times more than Friday. And yeah, before that, it was minimal. For the 5th of November, nothing. 4th of November, 63 million outflow. 1st of November, 10 million outflow. And even the positive days before that, in the last week of October, were around 7 mil, 4 mil, 2 mil, like really nominal stuff. Huge step change in the Ethereum ETF inflows. Bitcoin ETF inflows are obviously huge. 11th of November was 1.1 billion. 7th of November was 1.3 bill. So huge numbers there. And I guess the interesting thing to note, which Vance pointed out and I mentioned earlier, is ETH, at least yesterday, being at that quarter level. I think maybe that's what people would like it to be. I think there's not enough information or enough evidence to know that that will be how it will be in perpetuity moving forward. But I think that's what people are hoping it will be. If ETH can get a quarter, they would be super happy. Funk, any reflections from you there?
Yeah, I mean, it's not surprising in the sense that Bitcoin is the apex predator, right? So, I mean, all these big institutions are going to be gobbling up the Bitcoin first for their ETFs. And then it makes perfect sense when you know that BlackRock is bidding its BUIDL and everything else that it's doing on chain on ETH. It was only a matter of time. And I think now that the market started to move, there's a response from these big ETF players who are just going to start packing their ETH bags, if you will, because we've got to admit, right? Like ETH has been, the meme of the stick poking, come on, do something. And until it started ripping, and it's funny how this as TradFi markets, really, they're always going to play the momentum. They're going to play the trade. So when it's sitting there, it's not interesting to them. When it starts moving, that's when they're going to move. So I'm really just excited to see where this all goes. Not financial advice. I mean, I think one of the easiest trades right now is just if you're already exposed in crypto and you want to do something in TradFi, I keep a lot of dry powder in my Roth IRA. And yesterday I loaded up on HODL. I was chatting with the Van Eck intern, shout out to the Van Eck intern. And I said, I'm going to buy more HODL today because it's just, to me, is such an easy trade. We know where this is going. And I literally bought some. And then I just set the limit order for half the stack at twice the price. So I'll just reclaim my capital, let the rest rip. And I think we're, like I said, buckle up in the beginning of the show. I think we have no idea what's coming.
I like it. So you started moving towards the Bitcoin side there. Let's just give people a sense of what's happening. A few really interesting data points, I guess. One from Eric Balkunas, our favorite ETF reporter from Bloomberg, said that the Bitcoin industrial complex, being the ETFs plus master stock plus coin, all saw $38 billion in trading volume yesterday. The lifetime records being set across the board. Just an insane day. I think, he's very well positioned to be able to comment on that, given that he sees all of these ETFs all the time. A couple of other bits and pieces reported that MicroStrategy acquired more Bitcoin, 27,200 Bitcoin raised or bought by MicroStrategy as well. And it's just very, very significant purchases taking place here. Funky, what are your thoughts here as kind of the Bitcoin bull?
A couple of things. I think that one, I'm very happy with our MicroStrategy purchase from 2020. Even though I sold some, the remainder is still up 10x. And more importantly, I think Saylor said, this is one of my favorite quotes, MicroStrategy will always be buying the local top, because people used to just break his balls over the fact that, like, oh, it's a sign that Saylor keeps buying the top. He's the worst trader ever. And I think the average purchase price for MicroStrategy is just below $43,000. So basically doubled up. And I know in the rundown, when you quickly went through it, it said that right now they are basically going to overcome the biggest trade ever with some famous short that went 10 billion. So, I mean, the fact that MicroStrategy continues to do this, it has the plan to continue to purchase Bitcoin. And now with, Florida effectively taking over, because I don't know if you saw the news, Marco Rubio is going to be the Secretary of State, and like everybody in Florida effectively is going to be running the Trump administration. So if we get that Senator Loomis bill to go through and the strategic reserve becomes a thing, I have no idea where this is going. I was texting my brothers like mad. One of them already owns some Bitcoin, but he complains he didn't buy enough. And the other one has none. And I said to him, you need to have some exposure. I don't care if you're buying $100 a week. This is not going anywhere. And if we get game theory with other nation states effectively coming out and said, oh yeah, hey, by the way, we're going to be accumulating Bitcoin. It is going to be an arms race in that sense. And I think what's also really interesting, and you, just like we used to make fun of the pizza guy for the 10,000 Bitcoins for 2 pizzas from, you know, back in 2010, whatever it was, Germany will be the nation state Bitcoin pizza. Selling all 50,000 Bitcoins that they sold for like 50 some grand, they are going to regret that forever.
Strong words, Funky. I mean, it would be a terrible take. It would be such a terrible position for them, having sold the bottom, and then no more than a few months later, the biggest country in the world announces a strategic Bitcoin reserve. A couple of interesting other data points that I saw is that Bitcoin overtook silver as in terms of market cap, and someone shared that it would, in order for Bitcoin to equate roughly with the market cap of gold, Bitcoin would need to be at $1 million. So look, I don't know if it goes there immediately, but I think that's going to be one of the things against which you're going to be comparing this asset moving forward. How much of how does it perform versus gold? And I feel like that can be like a quite nice benchmark to say, well, if we're only X% versus gold, then we've still got this amount of room to run. Whether that's like immediately in the short term or whether that's a longer term thing, I feel like that's an interesting or a useful comparison.
Another good data point is that at 184K Bitcoin, the network will be worth more than any other public traded company in the world. NVIDIA, Microsoft, Google, you name it. All the ones that are on the list above it, 184K, it wipes all those out and then only has gold ahead of it.
I like these metrics. Han, want to come to you quickly here. How do you think about these comparisons that people make? Do you think they're appropriate? I know you're very an analytical person. When people are putting, whether it's Bitcoin against gold, Bitcoin against stock companies, I mean, arguably you can just make these comparisons about anything, right? And start to say, well, this Bitcoin's market cap is bigger than this country's GDP or something. You can ultimately compare anything, but you need to be comparing the right things. How do you think about this?
Yeah, in this case, I think it does make a lot of sense. It's because it is an asset class, and then so for example, if you take the equity asset class, there's constituent components, and so like to do a direct comparison between like BTC and components of an equity class makes a lot of sense to me, and it's also a good way for us to understand the scale of the Bitcoin network. Yeah, I like it. Yeah, and then just to echo what Funky said about Germany, the Bitcoin pizza, the Germany sell being a Bitcoin pizza, 100%. When I saw that, I was like, Germany's making a crucial mistake here, and they're going to regret this for the next couple decades for sure.
Damn, sounds ominous, but I mean, it's hard. It already seems to be a pretty huge error. So, well, I don't know what you'd do if you made that kind of trade, but look, we're going to get into the interview in just a little bit. Maybe a final point here on the meme stuff as we move into the art stuff. Doge ran up another 50% in the last 24 hours to 0.4. I don't know if you've seen Funky, the Bonk guy's account, who has been sharing all kinds of stuff over various plays. It's pretty entertaining. You know how you've got Murad's list on the one side, and everyone's been following Murad in some respect, because I guess that's just how people behave. They want people to tell them what to buy. Murad's got this list. That list started moving. I would say Bonk guy is kind of up there as well. He just hasn't put it in a spreadsheet. Like he's 100% like curating this list, but you have to go through the tweets to find different things. So he's been tweeting about Doge. He's been tweeting about Bonk. Obviously, he's called Bonk guy. He's had this long on Bonkon for I don't know how long. It's been ages. He's paid like $1 million in funding. And Bonk has just started moving as well. And his whole account, this is like, it's pretty crazy to see. It's just a whole load of retweets of people saying Bonk guy was right. I'm just going to, I'm sharing it for the people who are watching in, but literally there's, hang on, I need to find this to share it with you. It's literally just tweet after tweet saying bonk guy was right, bonk guy was right, bonk guy was right. Must be like 100 quote tweets here saying bonk guy was right. Because this is the guy who's held this long on bonk and refuses to close it because he thinks it's going to go higher, and it obviously crashed a hell of a lot compared to where it was at one point in time. I feel like that's just the stage of the cycle we're moving into, where people are really aiming, if not for the moon, even beyond. A quick thought from you on where we are on the meme coin side. Like, where are we from your perspective?
I think I want to give a shout out to Raheem because he said something about, I saw a post this morning where he said, you know, Doge went up 50%. And he's like, everybody needs to raise their targets. And as a Bonk holder, I think that I didn't even know about this Bonk guy. That's really interesting because about a year ago, when I got a whisper that they were going to be listed on Coinbase and Binance. So I just bought a little bit of Bonk. I don't normally go into memes with size. You know me, I'd rather stack sats and be cautious. But it hit 10x. I sold half of it, and then I'm now just sitting on a boom bag. So I woke up this morning, I looked in my wallet, and I was like, "Oh, look at Bonk, it's ripping again." So yeah, and I think people fade Bonk. Murad famously said, "Oh, it's a soulless thing," and so on and so forth. Solana is built on devs. This was a meme coin, effectively built for devs who were building during the bear. Do not fade Bonk. It's sort of like the OG. If we think of SHIB being sort of the ETH one, I think that Bonk there's a great case for it being sort of the OG meme on Solana. So I would not fade Bonk at all.
Fair enough. Han, one question on this. I know you typically veer away from the more speculative side of stuff, but I saw that, I don't know if you saw this on Shape, there was the circle. The circle was created and people were just like throwing money into the circle. And as people bought it, it got bigger and as it got smaller. How relevant is having an element of speculation on your chain? Like, I think people are obviously making different decisions, sometimes difficult decisions as to what they want to prioritize. Sometimes people think it's really important to incentivize that. Sometimes people think it's not. How do you frame it?
Yeah, it was a circle, and I thought it was actually a really interesting like art experiment because it was like performance art, but the circle gets bigger, so it was like a really interesting UX. But in general, we haven't sought out basically a lot of speculatory activity, and for Shape, but for that project in particular, I thought it was like a really great performance art thing.
I like it. Interesting stuff. Right. Keeping in mind the less speculative stuff, we do have these conversations on Tuesdays where we focus on some of the best fine digital art in the space. One of my favorite aspects of the show. Delighted to welcome Kjetil Golid to the stage with us today. Kjetil is a Norwegian generative artist and system developer based in Trondheim, Norway. His work focuses on exploring algorithms and data structures to create intricate visual art. Initially, Golid used programming as a tool to understand various algorithms, which gradually evolved into a creative practice where he develops custom algorithms to produce complex and aesthetically pleasing visuals. You might recognize his work, or his most notable work, maybe at least in the digital art space for NFT people, is Archetype, a series that examines the use of repetition to balance chaotic structures, resulting in complex yet harmonious expressions. Han, want to give you a chance to speak to Golid and welcome him to the stage.
Oh, absolutely. Golid is at this point a longtime friend, and we've worked together for some time now. And Golid, of course, has created legendary archetypes and really beloved by the community, and often referred to as like the master of colors. And also another thing that we worked on together was Decagon, which was a piece of art that it's like these blocks and they grow over time, and so it's almost like a Tamagotchi kind of experience. You own a piece of art, you feed it things, and then it grows. So really excited for this chat today.
Love it. Thanks so much for joining us, Kjetil. How are you doing?
Yeah, thanks for having me, and thanks for the introduction. I'm a bit under the weather, so yeah, if you keep the questions long, I'll keep the answers short. But yeah, thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. Great to have you with us. Look, so you've got this really interesting new work coming out. I think Autumn is the way to explain it. Is the way to pronounce it. But before we get into that, because we are going to talk about it, Han's been telling me about it after the show for at least a number of weeks before. So we do want to get into that. But just so people get a sense of who you are and set the scene, how did you find yourself working with the NFTs? How did you get into the space? What excited you about this universe?
Right. Well, it's starting to be a long time ago now. I think I got into NFTs in 2018, where I by then had been quite present on Twitter by sharing generative art for a couple of years, and have worked myself up a bit of a following. And some people were starting to dabble with NFTs and tipped me off for some sites. I think the first one was Known Origin that I started posting some work at and minting my first NFTs, and very few sales, more or less one guy buying all my stuff for $20, $30, stuff like that.
Was it an anonymous person, a completely anonymous person to you, or did you know them?
It was art gnome Jason Bailey.
Oh wow!
Yeah, he was. I feel like he was buying all the NFTs at this stage. He was the one keeping the community alive.
For the people who don't know, just explain who Art Gnome is. I know Art Gnome because when I was learning about NFTs in 2021, it was Jason Bailey's articles that were written like a few years before that helped me understand like why NFTs from an art perspective were going to be so important. And then I ended up following quite a lot of his work. And then when he would create pieces on platforms like Feral File, I would just go and buy all the stuff because I thought that this was the person that knew, who's almost like the first writer who was articulating the value prop. That's from my perspective as someone who came in like relatively late. Is that how you describe it? What's your perspective?
Yeah, no, that's basically it. He's like this, or he was this kind of prophet almost in the space. He is now art curator, and that's how I got to know him a bit. I was curating a show for Kate Voss that I attended, and yeah, all around a great guy. Yeah, so that's kind of how I got into this, and suddenly found myself in a good situation where, or a good position when everything broke loose in 2020, 2021. And I found myself being able to live over this full time, which was just the dream for me for years by then, to be able to spend my working hours making generative art instead of my spare time. So suddenly I had spare time again.
What had you been doing before? Were you always working in art? What were you doing before?
I've been doing some different things, but I've been 4 years in as an IT consultant, data analyst, and stuff like that. Yeah.
And then you found yourself in this position to really take advantage. What would you say was the key driving factor to be able to instigate that success? Were you simply early? Was there some other specific factors? What kind of drove that initial success for you?
Well, it's always hard to say. I think a lot of my work has a certain appeal, like quick appeal to people, with striking colors, and it usually can stand out from the crowd, I guess. I'm also, I try to keep my style somewhat coherent between my projects, and make it so that so you can kind of see like this red thread going through my work, and big fan of systems and abstract structures that I try to visualize in a good way. That's kind of my approach every time I start a new project.
It's very interesting. I'm just sharing some of Golid's work on the screen for the people who are watching in. Remember, we're live on YouTube video, X video as well, if you prefer to see in, but we'll do our best to explain it verbally too. You mentioned systems and you mentioned structures. That's definitely a theme that runs through your work. What inspired that specific interest? Talk us through why that's become such a recurring theme in your work.
Right. Well, I took my degree in computer science, and quickly fell in love with algorithms and data structures, and basically used this tool, this like visual coding tool, as like an aid to understand these concepts. So I visualized different sorting algorithms, and I visualized all of these different useful algorithms. And at some point, I started to take all of these useful algorithms and make them less useful, but maybe more visually intriguing. And that's kind of how it all started. And since then, I've mostly been kind of structure first in my work, so that I first come up with something like some interesting process or method or interaction, and try to create like this clear visualization of that on top of it.
Very interesting. Out of these pieces, I like to ask artists this because you never get the chance to really ask this question. We can see kind of the full, I don't know if this is all of your collections, but a variety of collections from Deca. Do you have any particular favorite collection that we can see here? Is there one that stands out to you that you're particularly proud of or interesting, and why would that be?
Right, I'm a big fan of the Expanse series, which is the one next to the Deca there, on top.
This one?
It's the yes, exactly. Speaking of colors, I felt like I found some really good palettes here. So this is a multiple piece series, so you can see they all have different palettes. So this one is one I'm really happy with, and it's usually it's this recency bias. I'm usually most excited about the stuff I made most recently. So yeah.
Does that happen with you? Because I know as a creative person as well, one of the things that happens is I actually started when I used to write. I used to write more than I do now, but I always used to write things and I used to think it was really good. And then after a while, you actually veer into disliking stuff. Does that ever happen? Does that ever happen to you as well? Like, or do you just tend to like the things that are most recent always?
Well, I can certainly get sick of something when having stared at it for too long, or feeling like you are kind of too close to it at some point, and really feeling like you just need a break from it. So that is certainly something I feel sometimes, but usually it's it's important, I feel like, to finish a project within a certain time span, because after that it starts to just the whole process starts to degrade, and you kind of lose what you were initially aiming for, and you have just been looking at the same thing for too long.
Interesting. How long do you usually try to complete projects in? Do you have a specific amount of time?
Well, I have this way of working that I create a lot of small code libraries that are really disjointed and doesn't really make a project on its own, but are like these small isolated snippets that does a very specific thing. So when I then, and this is what I spend most of my time making. So when it comes to creating a new project, I start combining these libraries and putting them together in a way that creates something intriguing for me, and I try to find a fitting visualization for it, and then do it from there. So even though technically you could say that I've spent months on it because I created all of these small snippets, those snippets were never made in order to actually make that specific art piece.
Got it. Very, very interesting. I always like understanding any creative process. I find that very interesting. I want to move over to your latest piece, which you have been, I think you shared some of the details yesterday or this morning, potentially, just to get people up to speed. I'll share it on the screen in a moment too. OTEM is a system that generates universes. In these universes, elements are represented as NFTs, and elements can react and combine with other elements to form larger compounds or alloys. I know this was exciting Han very much when he's trying to think of all the possibilities that NFTs can have. All elements and molecules have a set of properties like mass, electrical conductivity, or toughness that can serve as an interface for other worlds to build upon. A universe is generated up front based on a small set of randomized parameters and serves as a central reference point for when element creation and reactions are simulated. This makes all processes deterministic and internally coherent within the universe. So this sounds super exciting. Want to throw to Han in a second as well to hear his thoughts. But Kjetil first, what was the inspiration for this? And then you'll have to do a little bit of explanation for our listeners here to explain what this means practically for a person who is interested and is trying to understand how this NFT helps them interact with the described universe.
Yeah, so first of all, this is a huge departure from what I've done earlier, as it's not individual art pieces that is being generated here. The whole thing is a much more interactive thing that I've ever done before, at least while working as a generative artist. No, the inspiration came from chemistry and the periodic table. Been fascinating about that for a long time, and especially as a generative artist, I felt that the periodic table is in many ways like the quintessential example of emergent behavior in nature. So when you look at the periodic table, you can see an overview of all the different elements we have in our world, and the only difference between them, their input, is their proton number. So just one number. There's of course a lot of more information that goes into the system, but the only thing differing these is their proton number. And what comes out of this, this can then generate the number of neutrons this has, and this generates the number of electrons, generates where these electrons place themselves in the shells around the nucleus, and all of this kind of comes together only from this one number you gave it to a range of different molecules that are so vastly different in their behavior. And this was something I wanted to try to kind of recreate and simulate, not trying to kind of simulate the real world. A lot of people try to do this, and it's a very hard task. So instead of trying to simulate it, I try to find clever ways to kind of find shortcuts and make systems that doesn't work as the real world, but kind of gives the same-ish results. So creating systems that create systems in a way, a system that can create a periodic table that again can take a number, a proton number, and output a molecule with very unique properties. And the reason why this is interesting in an on-chain context is that these particles can be building blocks for whatever you want, just like how particles in our world can be built on top to create the whole field of biology, and even further to create whatever we see around us. But you don't even need to really go that far. You now have these units, these blocks that all have just a list of values of properties, and as a developer or as a content creator, you can pretty much interpret these values however you want to create something on top of it that needs these blocks to exist. Kind of making them like on-chain Lego blocks that you can use as input to create new things that you can create.
Very exciting. Han, wanted to bring you in here. This was something that was very exciting to you. You've been telling me about this for a little bit. What's so interesting to you about this on-chain Lego block style design, which would enable people to kind of build on top of? How are you thinking about this? What's exciting you about it?
There's so many things. This is on its surface, it looks like a chemistry kind of experiment, which itself is like pretty amazingly cool. First of all, I think with NFTs, we kind of got stuck with the idea that, at least in Ethereum, sorry if there's any background noise, we got stuck with the idea that NFTs are things that you just buy, hold, and sell. And we completely forgot the fact that NFTs are fully computational things, and the only reason we kind of forgot about that was on ETH1, computation and storage is prohibitively expensive. And now on L2, like Shape, you can do things like a project like Autumn, which allows you to do simulate chemical reactions. So as just a geek, that just is like very exciting. But then the next part is, as I mentioned before, we want to create this like world building on Shape. And what's so exciting about the Autumn project by Golid is this is a fundamental layer on top of which other worlds will be built. Just as in our physical reality, as Golid mentioned, we have all of the richness of the physical world from atoms. A similar kind of world can arise on Shape. So here's a very concrete question, example. So let's say I create like a collection of like weapons, right? And then let's say there's a category called like swords. Well, these swords can say, I want to have atoms be part of what the sword is, like that's the material that the sword is made of. And then you can say that the hardness or toughness or whatever property it is, that property is actually the power of the weapon. Well, now we're going to find the exact same, like if you look back in history, people are finding metallurgical like alloys that they wanted that made swords better, and each time is a step up in technology. That same kind of like discovery and search is going to happen with atoms. Everybody's going to be trying to find what is the molecule that has the highest weapon, highest the hardness or toughness, and nobody knows. Like Golid doesn't even know either. It's a simulated world. And so it's just going to create such a rich world. And so many of the crafting games that we're familiar with, they kind of just scratched the surface. And what Golid did was like he dug deep. And there's going to be so many interesting ways to use the system going forward.
That sounds really, really exciting. Definitely pushing the frontier of kind of on-chain experience. I'm conscious of time. We've just got a few minutes left, Kjetil. So I'm going to bring Funky in here to maybe have one of the final questions.
First and foremost, my nerd hackles are way up. 30 years ago when I left high school, I wanted to be a chemical engineer. And I love physical sciences. So this is really, really, really cool. And I noticed the W on your shelf for tungsten, like as soon as you came on cam. So this is really awesome. But Kjetil, like what do you foresee in terms of how people are going to, like, do you have expectations or hopes for how participants interact with this new art?
Right. Yeah, by the way, this is also me just being a wannabe scientist. I guess we're all wannabe scientists. No, I honestly don't know what people will make. I have this hope that that people will find some ingenious way or ingenious ways to use this. It's there's a lot of stuff that I would want to make with it. I'm just thinking of things like Minecraft, where the materials are randomized, and you don't really know when you mine a new material, you don't really know its properties, so you need to kind of research that or figure out what this can be good for. You don't have these. You cannot go on the internet to look up the recipe for making this and this, because no one has ever touched this world. So you have to figure that out for yourself. And I guess that's kind of at the core here, that when stuff is procedurally generated, not only is it well, it is unique, and what makes that very cool is that you cannot just automate the process immediately and kind of optimize. You need to do some sort of, call it, research, and I think that is very cool. You kind of need to do the work yourself and not just look up best way to optimize the run. Yeah.
I love it. I think the exploratory aspect, where no one really knows what they're going to get, is super interesting and very exciting. Look, Kjetil, we're drawing to a close here. Is there any other details that you'd like to share before we close up?
No, yeah, you can find Autumn soon. Follow me on X to see the latest updates there. And yeah, check it out.
Amazing. Thanks so much for joining us. Thanks, Kjetil, for joining us. Thanks, Han, for setting this up. Thanks, Funky, for co-hosting. Thanks to our sponsor for today's show, Gondi, for seeing the vision for this show. Gondi is a premier NFT lending platform with their routinely millions of dollars of loans given against autoglyphs, CryptoPunks, Fidenzas, and X copies, to name just a few. Check them out if you're looking to earn as a lender or unlock liquidity as a borrower. Thanks so much for joining us, everyone. We will be back again as usual tomorrow, 7 a.m. Eastern time, for 1 hour. Have a wonderful day. Take care, and we will see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.